Lincoln College Preparatory Academy is Kansas City's oldest public high school and the city's first high school for Black students. It's often ranked as one of the best high schools in Missouri.
Hi, baby. How are you? Better? Yeah. Good.
It's also, according to Principal Chanel Smith, completely falling apart.
I graduated in 99, but I guess for me, it never looked deteriorated. It just looked nostalgic. But when I came as principal, that's when it really started to dawn on me that, like, this is bad. Like, it should not look exactly the same, right?
It's certainly not great for teacher recruitment and retention or quality of life for students.
Because it is so historic, it's so meaningful. But it is hard to go into that school and be like, oh, well, there's a rat crawling in my classroom. There's cracks in the ceilings and the bathrooms. Like, things can just be, like, nasty in the school, right?
We need way newer stuff here at Lincoln Prep.
Students have tried to improve the place, like painting the walls or creating makeshift study spaces, but it doesn't change the fact at hand. This is an old building, and there's a lot more like it in this district.
Lincoln is just as raggedy as any other school in KCPS.
I'm Mackenzie Martin. This is The People's History of Kansas City, and on this episode, Kansas City's strained relationship with public education and how KCPS ended up in this predicament.
You got kids in buildings that many school districts around this country would never let their kids still be learning, and it's just that simple.
The average age of a building in Kansas City public schools is 60 years old, but some are closer to 100. And there are a lot of infrastructure problems and not nearly enough resources. That's why on April 8th, Kansas City will ask voters to invest in its public school system by passing the district's first bond measure in nearly 60 years. And the stakes for this vote are incredibly high because there has been a lot of turmoil at KCPS over the years.
In the 1960s, its public schools went from mostly white to mostly black, and taxpayers stopped approving increases in school spending.
After decades of disinvestment by the community, a history-making federal lawsuit over desegregation, and battles over accreditation, the tide at KCPS has changed. And a lot of people think that passing this bond measure is the key to finally making KCPS the school district its students deserve.
This bond would give the community an opportunity to say out loud, we believe in you, and it would give us a chance to pay that back and prove to them that it was worth it.
Here to guide us through all of this is KCUR's education reporter, Jodi Fortino. Hi, Jodi.
Hey, Mackenzie.
So I went to public schools, K through 12. I'm from Wisconsin, where we have pretty good schools. Our governor is actually a former superintendent. But when I moved to Kansas City, I was really surprised to find out that most of the people I was meeting did not attend public school. And I pretty quickly found out that it wasn't because everyone I was meeting was rich. It was more that people have really strong feelings about KCPS. And as a result, a lot of parents choose not to send their kids there, instead opting for private schools or charter schools. And sometimes they're making really big sacrifices to make that happen. Does that ring true with your reporting?
It does. You know, while I do often talk to people whose children attend KCPS, I've also talked to families who may work in Kansas City but live in the suburbs or live here and have kids who attend charters. I don't often ask why, but there's an unspoken understanding that parents enroll their kids where they believe they will best succeed. To understand how parents make those decisions, I talked with Julie Holland.
What I've really come to realize is that parents want what's best for their children, and every child is different.
Julie is the director of the Parent Leadership Training Institute and the former education advisor for Kansas City. So she has a unique view of this issue. Julie said parents often aren't charter or public school purists. So it's not like they're pitting those education systems against another. Theoretically, a lot of Kansas City parents believe in public schools. Sure, they want them to be strong, but they're just looking for the best school for their child right now.
Maybe they're gifted, or they like Montessori, or they really need something in Spanish immersion.
So the same kid may attend a KCPS school for elementary, and then a charter for middle and high school. And with roughly half of Kansas City's children attending charters, that's a lot of families who all decided the school district won't best meet their child's needs. The way charters work is when a student enrolls in a charter school, the state money designated for that child no longer goes to their neighborhood school. That student is now counted at the charter, which ups their budget. And when more and more families do that, the public school district can lose out on a lot of funding.
So it's a self-perpetuating cycle, basically.
Exactly. The first charter schools in Kansas City opened in 1999. At that time, about 33,000 students attended Kansas City public schools. Enrollment now sits at just about 14,000, so less than half of what it was pre-charter. And buildings and facility conditions play a huge part in why some families choose not to send their kids to KCPS. Julie says having nice classrooms can be really meaningful.
You walk into a building, you're like, oh, wow, this place feels like a school, or this place feels well kept up. And I think those are things that matter. And it also matters to the children when they walk in, that they feel like they are treated as important as they are.
So we've talked a lot about the buildings, but of course, the other big reason why some parents didn't want their kids going to KCPS for a while was because the district lost accreditation in 2000 and didn't fully gain it back for more than 2 decades.
Yeah, that was a concern for many families.
What exactly does it mean to not be an accredited school?
So accreditation is basically the State Department of Education's seal of approval that you're meeting academic standards. They also look at the district's leadership and finances to make sure it's on track. If a school loses accreditation, there's a big consequence. If one of their students wants to transfer to a neighboring district with accreditation, their home district will have to foot the bill for tuition. And when the Missouri legislature passed a bill in 1998 allowing charter schools to open in Kansas City, families started choosing other options than KCPS. The school districts that I've spoken with, including KCPS, say the biggest consequence of losing accreditation is the stigma.
I think there may have been a perception 20 years ago that it was mismanaged, that they were unaccredited, and that it was just not a place that was well functioning.
And that negative reputation has been persistent, even after the district started to turn itself around.
If you want to continue to have a perception, which is not maybe really aligned with reality anymore, about what you think KCPS is, just because you've been normed that way or socialized that way, or you could really say, this is an opportunity to make a change and to make a different trajectory for KCPS.
Yeah, I definitely agree that in many circles, the district's reputation has improved a lot in the last decade. And part of that can be attributed to the way it changed under the leadership of former Kansas City Public Schools Superintendent Mark Bedell.
Yes, his leadership ran from 2016 to 2022. Before him, it was a rotating door of school leadership. Bedell was the district's longest-serving superintendent in 50 years.
I remember telling the school board after I got through the first 100 days that felt like the bag of goods that I guess people were selling them or even sold me, when I opened up that bag, it was nothing but bricks in there.
Bedell got hired here and was pretty appalled immediately by what he saw.
Facility-wise, that was a whole different ball game, because when I got there, I learned that we didn't even have turf football fields.
Prior to here, he had been in Baltimore County and Houston.
You think about the districts I came from, like that stuff was just not acceptable.
One of Mark Bedell's crowning achievements is that KCPS regained accreditation under his leadership. How did he even do that?
It was a lot of hard work. Not only did he have to get their test scores and graduation rates up, they had to show that they could sustain that growth. It came close a few years, but would slip the next.
Welcome to J.A. Rogers Elementary, home of the Mighty Eagle.
I was at a press conference in 2022, right after the Missouri State Board of Education decided to grant KCPS full accreditation, and the excitement was palpable.
Please join me in welcoming our esteemed superintendent to the podium, Dr. Mark Bedell.
Cannot express to you how I feel right now.
Bedell hoped the stamp of approval would give not only students, but the entire city pride in the district.
Because it's not about me. It never was about me. It's about this city. Now let's get out here. We celebrate now. We roll our sleeves up. And we got to get back to work. Because we owe that to our kids.
Bedell left KCPS 3 years ago. He now leads Anne Arundel County Public Schools in a high-income Baltimore suburb. But I get the feeling Kansas City is never far from his mind.
I'm wondering, when I said I was going to be asking you about the history of KCPS, the facilities and all that, what came to mind for you?
what came to mind was, man, I feel like I really have to do this call. I felt like there was some unfinished work.
What Bedell says still pains him are those buildings. He is still disappointed that he couldn't get a bond passed for the school district.
I feel like my legacy was solidified by what I did during those 6 years, but I felt like that would have just been the cherry on the top.
So now the district has new leadership. Dr. Jennifer Collier took over as superintendent in 2022. And I have to think she's sort of picking up the torch that Bedell left here.
Yes, Dr. Collier had big shoes to fill. But the community trusted her to do the job, in part because she's been working in the district for more than 20 years as a teacher, principal, administrator, and now superintendent. The district won its accreditation battle, but it had a lot of other problems to tackle. Bedell left Collier with a really big task: what to do with aging buildings that were expensive to upkeep and didn't have enough students to fill them. A few years ago, KCPS leaders proposed closing 10 schools, which would have required a massive reshuffling of students and changed the shapes of these neighborhoods.
We do not want to do this, but we do need a solution.
The community pushed back hard.
Excuse me, ma'am.
After weeks of heated meetings, KCPS scaled back its original plan. In 2023, decided to close only 2 schools rather than 10. It was a stressful time for families, but the process actually showed the community that Collier would listen to their needs.
I'm willing to believe and trust that this community is going to get on board and help us as a school system make the improvements that we need to make.
The school district leveraged the momentum of families organizing to keep their schools open by creating engagement groups focused on issues like student performance, safe schools, enrollment, and of course, the bond. A little over a year later, the school district announced they'd finally be asking voters to approve a ballot measure to fund building improvements. Since then, they've been busy educating voters what they'll be asking them for.
Before we go any further, can you break down exactly all of the nuances here of what a bond is?
Great question, and one I had when I first started covering education. So a general obligation bond is the primary way school districts fund improvements and repairs to buildings. School districts have to ask property owners for permission to borrow that money since residents' property taxes cover the principal and the interest payment. Long story short, KCPS would receive $424 million from this April bond measure. Another $50 million of the funding would go to charter schools that are participating.
So how much would that cost voters?
If you own a $200,000 home within the boundaries of KCPS, you would pay $231.80 a year, according to the district. That comes out to a little under $20 a month, but more than half of homeowners would actually pay less than that.
Thank you. That is all really great context as we think about the fact that Kansas City voters haven't passed a general obligation bond for the school district since 1967. Has KCPS put some out there and failed, or is this the first time in a long time that they're even trying?
Public perception has been so bad, KCPS hasn't even attempted to ask voters to pass a bond since the 1970s. Back then, it didn't even manage to win a third of the vote. To pass the bond this April, KCPS will have to convince 57% of voters, so it won't be easy.
It feels like at the heart of this vote is whether the community trusts Kansas City public schools.
And a lot of this distrust dates back 5 decades to this notorious lawsuit over school desegregation.
People will say, well, they got $2 billion and they wasted all of that money. It didn't really do what it was intended to do. I would tell people to please stop penalizing the school district for the sins of the past. I wasn't there for that. Jennifer Collier wasn't there for that. This current board wasn't there for that. And these kids most certainly weren't there during those times. So it's time for us to put all of that behind and recognize the district is in a much better place.
Okay, Jodi, the lawsuit you're talking about, Missouri v. Jenkins, was pretty revolutionary in its time, but it's also incredibly complicated. Can you explain how this all came about?
One of the people that really helped me understand this era of KCPS was Dr. Jessie Kirksey. She's held a number of different roles during her 58-year tenure in Kansas City Public Schools, long enough that they've had to make new awards to celebrate how long she's been there.
I love that.
I started in 1966-67 school year as a first grade teacher at Longfellow School, 2830 Homes. I lived in Kansas City, Kansas. So I caught 3 buses, to get over here.
When Kirksey first started in the district, she describes the buildings as well-kept with beautiful yards. The classrooms felt that way too. She said they had a surplus of teachers and even consultants for each grade level to help teachers with things like writing, speaking, or working with parents. But by the 70s, she started to see a shift. The school district tried and failed to pass a bond in the late 60s, and the buildings started to show signs.
We didn't have the maintenance for our schools, and so our schools were just falling apart and things like that.
The district has had to fund repairs and building projects out of the same pot it uses to operate and pay teachers. That means it's fallen behind on basic maintenance to building infrastructure, $650 million worth. Issues like electric wiring, windows, roofs, plumbing, foundations, and HVAC systems.
It was interesting how we navigated being a district that had things to a district that didn't have as many resources.
I have to think part of what's going on here, too, is white flight. The phenomenon that we saw all over the U.S., especially from the 40s to the 70s, where white parents would take their kids and abandon urban centers for the suburbs as a way to avoid attending schools with black kids.
Yes, after Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 found that segregation in schools was unconstitutional, the Supreme Court ordered all public districts in the United States to desegregate, quote, with all deliberate speed. Of course, that didn't fully happen in practice. Over the next 2 decades, the Kansas City School Board got rid of explicitly racial school boundaries, but it kept illegally changing attendance rules to ensure white schools stayed majority white and black schools stayed majority black, with Troost Avenue serving as the border. Some white families left Kansas City altogether for the suburbs or communities served by once rural school districts. Missouri lawmakers also worked to keep Kansas City schools segregated. The General Assembly passed a law preventing the district from expanding even while Kansas City annexed nearby towns, so that smaller majority white districts like Center and Hickman Mills wouldn't become part of the KCPS system. Lengthy teacher strikes in 1974 and 1977 dealt another blow to the school district. Teachers were frustrated over low pay, overcrowded classrooms, and a lack of education programs, lingering consequences of segregation.
How intense did these strikes get?
It got really heated. The teachers' union president went to jail for 10 days for failing to obey an order prohibiting the strike. The union was also fined thousands of dollars after the strike closed schools for more than a month. It made national headlines, which really underlines this public perception of KCPS as chaotic.
I had people tell me that they felt that the district had never really recovered from those 2 teacher strikes.
Dr. Joshua Dunn is the author of Complex Justice, The Case of Missouri v. Jenkins.
I think the result of them was a loss of public confidence in the school district.
So basically, there are a lot of factors here in the 70s that are contributing to families leaving the school district. And one of those is that it was still heavily segregated, which was illegal.
Yes, and civil rights groups were taking notice. So in 1973, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference filed a lawsuit. The next year, a federal investigation found the school district had illegally perpetuated segregation and passed on opportunities to desegregate. In order to not lose federal funding, the district had to redraw attendance boundaries and launch a busing program aimed at desegregating, which a lot of families, both black and white, didn't like.
You could call it white flight, but it was broader than that. You actually saw a lot of families leave across racial categories. And so in some ways, you could call it middle-class flight.
Then in 1977, Kansas City Public Schools filed its own lawsuit against the states of Kansas, Missouri, federal agencies, and the surrounding suburban districts.
It was really a retaliation against the federal government for that mandated desegregation plan.
It was sort of looking for payback, literally. KCPS argued the states and districts had a financial responsibility to help desegregate public schools. Dunn said it's the only desegregation lawsuit he's heard of that was filed by a school district itself. And it ended with this strange twist. The federal judge, Judge Russell Clark, ended up making Kansas City Public Schools a defendant in its own lawsuit.
So they got sued. Then the judge was basically like, have you considered it's actually maybe your fault?
Pretty much.
A long legal battle finally ended when Judge Clark ruled that Kansas City was in fact guilty of segregating its schools.
The judge's solution was that in 1985, he ordered KCPS to build expensive magnet schools to the tune of $2 billion.
Kansas City's unprecedented desegregation plan envisioned a system of stunning new and remodeled magnet or theme schools. A system so special that white students would prefer it to suburban, parochial, or private schools.
And these were super nice schools. Some of the amenities included a 2,000 square foot planetarium, petting zoos, robotics labs, a temperature-controlled art gallery, movie editing, and screening rooms.
They wanted to say, we have a swimming pool, we have this, we have science lab, we have all the equipment.
Kirksey was director of elementary education at that time.
It gave them a feeling that, boy, our children, they're really going places.
This all sounds amazing, but where is the funding coming for all of this?
Well, the judge ordered that Kansas City's property taxes get doubled. So he wanted district and state taxpayers to pay the bill for desegregation.
So the idea was to gold plate the school district, which would also improve the quality of education for the students in Kansas City, but then also hopefully attract white students from the suburbs.
So did it work? Did this big influx of money and school improvements actually increase test scores like they wanted?
Not really. Elementary schools improved a little bit, but middle and high school scores still remained really low, even in these new up-to-date buildings.
Did the kids at least like the new schools?
So I talked to Matt Oakes. He attended North Rock Creek and Knott's Elementary in the early 90s. They were designated as environmental science magnets and had walking trails behind the schools, greenhouses where students could grow plants, and a river where they could experience the water cycle.
That sounds really idyllic.
To get into an environment where I can kind of learn and tinker, that was a big thing.
His mom grew up out of state, and she thought KCPS was the best thing ever.
My mom had never seen like a school district that had a greenhouse or, novel things that we take for granted, like before and after school care.
Of course, at some point, this dream comes to an end, right?
In 1995, the United States Supreme Court struck down the case, arguing that parts of the plan were unconstitutional and exceeded the court's scope. The court also urged Judge Clark to end the judicial supervision of KCPS and return control to the school district.
Remember the day, because we were in before and after school care, and we were watching the news when the DSI case got struck down.
Late last month, the Supreme Court ruled that Judge Clark could not make state taxpayers fund the Showcase desegregation plan.
And I remember my teachers shushing us to be quiet because they were watching on TV and they're just like, we don't know what this means.
It was the Supreme Court's final decision on the case. And that was also the last time the Supreme Court addressed desegregation.
A few years later, we lose accreditation and it's kind of a mass exodus. I lost a lot of friends, It became unsure, can I go to college? What does this mean?
Hey, how's it going? It's Suzanne Hogan. Something we've been talking about a lot this episode is desegregation in schools. And did you know that Kansas City helped lay the foundation for all of that? Back in 1948, a group of women got fed up with the quality of education at a 2-room schoolhouse in Johnson County, Kansas. So they started their own school in living rooms. Their fight went all the way to the Kansas Supreme Court, and they ended up integrating a Kansas grade school 5 years before Brown v. Board of Education. Cue up the episode called The Walker Walkout right now to learn all about it.
Okay, Jodi, so in 1985, property taxes double and Kansas City Public Schools gets this huge influx of funding as a result of this federal desegregation case. And then less than a decade later, it all goes away. Did the amenities at least draw in white families the way they were supposed to?
Not really. It was largely considered a failure. White parents never returned to KCPS the way the district hoped. By 1996, 1 year later, the school district had a non-white population of about 78%. Enrollment across the district was dwindling. That trend sped up when charter schools started opening in 1999 because it gave families who were dissatisfied with KCPS an alternative. Here's Matt Oakes again, who was a KCPS student during all of this.
It kind of put a chip on your shoulder because we could hear what people were saying about us, maybe what we did or didn't deserve or how worthy we were for things.
So most white families around Kansas City didn't want to enroll in KCPS, even in these fancy magnet schools. Taxpayers outside of KC were angry they had to pay for it. How did non-white families feel about the desegregation plan?
It was also controversial. Schools were given a quota for how many white families needed to enroll, but never reached those numbers. So some black families couldn't enroll their children in the district's most desirable schools, like Central High. Some even listed their children as white so they could get enrolled. There was also a stark difference in how students got to school. Students in the suburbs could receive a door-to-door taxi service to attend the magnet schools, while kids who lived inside the district had to walk or take the bus. Black civic organizations and parents first pushed to overturn the quota system, and then some campaigned to eliminate the magnet schools altogether. Here's author Joshua Dunn again.
Obviously, everyone wanted better schools for their kids, but then they did disagree with some, often with how those resources were deployed, and thought that they weren't necessarily helping their kids.
Money must have been a problem too, right? Since all those property taxes that were used to purchase these amenities and fix buildings just vanished.
Yeah, the district was left with huge, beautiful buildings, but neither the money or enrollment to keep them up. As a result, they've been deteriorating ever since. And like I talked about earlier, the district has been pulling from the same pot of money they use for paying teachers and curriculum to also make repairs. But KCPS was not being proactive, and they certainly were not building anything new. That's something Matt Oakes grappled with when he joined the district's Board of Education in 2015.
Once I got on school board, there was a general thirst for the district to be better.
Matt made it a personal goal to support education after he graduated from college and saw the quality of other schools across the country. But when he returned, he was disappointed to find that not much had changed.
Lincoln High School, we used to kind of always joke there was a warp in the middle of the gym floor. And so you had to be careful about it while playing basketball or everything. And, when it's on school board, I'd be, shocked that warp was still there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and one of the people that really helped me understand why so little has changed was Dr. Jessie Kirksey. She said even now, there's a lot of pain around how the deseg case ended.
It was an attempt to bring things together. We weren't successful, but it was an attempt.
Former Superintendent Bedell acknowledges how the failed desegregation effort left so many people disappointed, even bitter. But he hopes families and Kansas City voters can move forward, because the district has. Everyone tells me they're not the same school system they once were.
At some point, we got to say, have they not done enough to demonstrate to us that this is a district on the rise? This is the time.
Yeah, obviously there are a lot of people who are voting in this election that don't have kids in the district. So it's easy to say, this doesn't impact me. I don't want my taxes to go up. But a common rebuttal that I hear to that is that it's the public's job to educate children. And if you want educated and informed people making decisions in your community in the future, you should care about the quality of schools now.
Especially since Kansas City is largely considered a city on the rise. We have big sports teams, a growing downtown. It feels like people want to live here. And if you want people to move to a city, you need good schools. The school district is seeing enrollment growing, test scores are improving, and more students are graduating. And with those successes, it feels like the public perception of KCPS as a failing district, that's finally changing too.
And I think this community, because we have gone through all these different steps, now they see a need for us coming together as one and saying this is not only for Black, this is not only for white, this is for all of us.
I feel like it just goes back to that element of trust. Like this whole vote on April 8th comes down to whether or not the community trusts KCPS.
Yeah, a lot of people, including myself, see this as a chance for the community to say it believes in Kansas City's public education system. After decades of distrust and disinvestment, the stakes for this bond vote are pretty huge. A lot of people are worried about this bond not passing because, remember, the clearance bar is really high. Not just a majority approval, but 57% or it fails.
We're in a stage where we're constantly having to, patch something up.
Dr. Daryl Davis is the deputy superintendent of Kansas City Public Schools. He came into the district as a teacher in the mid-1990s towards the tail end of the desegregation case.
And if we don't pass a bond, where are we going to place the students?
If the bond fails, Davis said KCPS would have to continue what they've been doing, trying to keep up their buildings without any dedicated funding for it. Missing ceiling tiles, rusting walls, and rundown floors would remain, and the district would make repairs as needed with what money they have. Many new buildings or projects to improve student learning would be off the table. Davis said the district would regroup and come back with a better message for the community. But Davis thinks if Kansas Cityans saw the KCPS buildings for themselves, as students see them, they'd feel differently.
Van Horn refused to come and play on the Northeast field because they feared injury of their athletes. So they said, we'll play you, but you all just come out here. And this young lady, as she's telling this story to me, she just broke out into tears and she started crying. And the impact on her was she felt less than.
Imagine stepping into a classroom in Kansas City in August in triple-digit temperatures. Up until last summer, KCPS didn't have central air in all of its high schools, and the older buildings struggled to keep cool. They became ovens.
And when I tell you, Jodi, nothing has changed, nothing has changed.
This is community organizer Ashley Johnson. Her oldest child just graduated from Southeast High School, and her youngest just started at Border Star Elementary School.
The auditorium was still hot. I was disheartened. We have schools that has to be shut down because they're too hot.
Man, Kansas City is way too hot to not have air conditioning in its schools.
Just 2 summers ago, KCPS had to dismiss students early for the entire first week of school because the classrooms were unbearably hot. The district has since added window units to each classroom, but that's a Band-Aid fix. Parents in the school district like Ashley are unfortunately used to Band-Aids.
We had to do what we had to do.
And having to support their schools when it felt like no one else was.
If things needed done in the school, collective parents would come together and try to get things done. If teachers needed extra supplies or something, we would all just chip in and all come together.
It's completely unfair, but it is inspiring to see how much effort these teachers and parents go through to try and improve the quality of education and the resources that these kids are getting.
Yes, of course, most suburban families don't have that burden. Voters in Johnson County and elsewhere in Jackson County, like Lee Summit and Independence, frequently pass school bonds to build new buildings and make repairs. Just having been in some of those classrooms, you can tell the difference.
So how are kids at KCPS feeling about the prospect of finally getting these buildings fixed?
I mean, they're thrilled. I talked with Zoe Wilson, who's a senior at Lincoln Prep. Zoe's actually running an Instagram page and educating other students about the bond.
When you're a kid, you don't really always think about that type of stuff. You think about, oh, this is my teacher, and I'm going to go learn things. But you don't think about why are the seats broken? Why do we not have enough chairs in the classroom? Stuff like that.
Zoe travels around the region for speech and debate tournaments, and they can tell the difference between their schools and others.
They don't have the problems that we do. They have new furniture, new buildings. They have murals on the walls. It's sort of disheartening, but it was always seen as something that was accepted to me. Like, students just were like, it's just because we're in an inner city school. We can't do anything about it, And I just want that to change.
It kind of feels like the bond is about more than just resources for students like Zoe. Like, it's also about the expectations and value that the Metro places on different schools and students.
Yeah, obviously building conditions like exposure to heat affects a student's ability to do well in school. But Dr. Jennifer Collier, the superintendent, told me that buildings also send unintentional messages to children that impact the way they view themselves.
Many of them often wonder, I've had parents tell me that their child comes home and asks, why do our buildings look like this? We want to eliminate that. We want to level the playing field, and we want our kids to know they're important, that they're worthy And they have the same kind of spaces and learning environments as other children that they're interfacing with each and every day.
Now with the bond, I think that students are starting to see that there is another option, that this isn't just assumed. We can do something about it and we can make a change.
Zoe did their senior paper on the desegregation case, so they understand the decades of racism and disinvestment that led to this moment. They think it's time for the community to make it right and fix what's been broken all this time.
The idea that we would leave schools out of that, the idea that we would leave Kansas City public schools to be the same idea that people had in their mind 30 years ago with desegregation, it just seems unfair. It seems like a failure of our city if we can't bring our schools along with on that ride towards a bigger, better, more awesome Kansas City that I'm seeing everywhere.
The KC School Bond vote will be on the April 8th ballot. You can read more about it at kcur.org/peopleshistory. A People's History of Kansas City was reported this month by Jodi Fortino and produced by me, Mackenzie Martin. Our editors were Madeline Fox and Gabe Rosenberg. Mix also by me. Special thanks this episode to KCPS student Tyler Jackson and the Kansas City Public Library. You heard sound from NewsHour Productions, PBS, and Blue Dot Sessions. We are a production of KCUR Studios, a podcast network in Kansas City, Missouri. And if you didn't already know, we have a huge amount of episodes in our archive, which is available at kcur.org and all of your favorite podcast apps. We spent a lot of time at Lincoln Prep this episode, and if you want to learn more about that iconic school, check out the episode, The Black History of Lincoln Prep. And while you're there, consider writing us a review and letting us know what you think of this show. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next month with another episode about the everyday heroes and underdogs who created Kansas City and the region.